is even more of what you're talking about. Yeah, I would say that those things are real. And in a sense, and I'm not just trying to yank it back to woke racism to push the book, but I'm really thinking about this. My book is about people. It's actually, I'm known for saying things Black people don't like. A lot of Black people aren't going to like woke racism, but woke racism is going to be hated by a lot of white people too. The woke person I'm really thinking about in that book is a white guy. And the white guy in that case is not somebody who I can hate, because I do see that there is a benefit that a person gets to this religion, even when it doesn't necessarily make, if we may pardon the term, sense. The person can't help it. I see where they're coming from and they frustrate me often. But it worries me that because religion is, let's call it for our purposes here, a different kind of reality, it can conflict with what an oppressed group needs in order to be most comfortable and happy in a complex society.
Well, okay, so let's talk about that for a minute. Now, one of the things you told me earlier on was that I think, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, absolutely. So if I've got this wrong, please correct me. Mm-hmm. It seemed to me that you were implying, if not outright stating, that the collectivist ethos of much of that discourse was interfering with your self-regard as an individual, but even more importantly, your ability to manifest yourself, appear as, and be treated as an individual. And so we're looking here, at least to some degree, for what might constitute a reasonable uniting principle. And one of the reasons that I've been opposing the collectivist thought that's characteristic of the insistence that group identity is the primary phenomenon, say socially and morally, more importantly, is that it's the wrong uniting principle. The right uniting principle is the divinity of the individual, to speak in religious terms. And we can strip that of its religious significance and say, well, part of it is that the proper level of analysis for political discourse is predicated on the sanctity of the individual. And so we need to get serious as a culture about whether or not we actually believe this and what the relationship between that belief and reality actually is. So
that's hard, because as you know, you're far ahead of this, far ahead of me on this. It's hard to be an individual. It's not natural. I don't think it's what we're hardwired for. It's a rather new concept. And many people spontaneously will say they want to be an individual. I think to an extent, though, that's fashion. And to most people, group identity is what gives them a sense of purpose. And that's the way human beings have always been. And it's hard to really make a person realize being an individual means that it's really just you. For example, many very smart Black people, I think, are under the impression that being an individual means that you have the bravery to stick your fist up and battle racist attitudes. But the problem is that is now a group activity. That's something that lots and lots of other people are doing. It only may seem a little bit unusual to a very naive white person looking on or subject to it. And so the question is, how do you really feel about these things? If you want to battle racism, how would you like to do it, as opposed to adopting certain mantras and battle cries? But mantras and battle cries are what we human beings do. We do it together. That's hard. That's a tough thing, because individualism might not be the way that humanity needs to go. I personally would prefer it. That's my sense. And that's your sense, I think. But I think a very coherent case could be made that particular conception of marching to the beat of your own drummer is an eccentricity that certain solitary-minded people came to cherish amidst industrialization over a certain 200 or 300 years. I don't know if I could refute that.
So I think that's an extremely astute objection, let's say, especially the observation that and you touched on this earlier, that requirement for group identification is deeply embedded in the substructure of human consciousness. So let's say, well, we want to have friends, we want to have a family, we want to have a town or something like that, a community of 200, right, embedded in a town. I think the question isn't, or the issue isn't so much the fact that the idea that the individual is the uniting principle should supplant that. It's that should be organized underneath that in some, because it isn't an issue of the absence of the necessity for group identity, because without that we couldn't do anything together, and wouldn't that be a catastrophe?
Right. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so that has to be recognized. And I do think, to give the woke types, and even if it's a religious manifestation there do, if that does produce a sense of cohesive group identity, then you can understand the longing for that in a fractionated community that in some senses got too psychologically large. So that has to be contended with. But I do really, see, because I viewed the culture wars in the university, I really believe they're battling out something extraordinarily deep. It's not, this isn't a surface issue. Part of the debate, and this emerged out of France, the French intellectual tradition, fundamentally, as far as I'm concerned, is the question of what level of conception should be primary. And the assault on the patriarchy and on, there's more to it than that, is part of an assault on the idea of individuality and the truth that individuals hold in their language. It's an assault on all of that. It's deep criticism. And I think it's incredibly dangerous, but I understand why it arose. And so
definitely.
And I was curious about you because you said at the beginning that even though your mother had taught you, in some sense, these woke precepts, there was something in you that rebelled against it.
Yeah,
what was that?
Yeah, it's not, I don't rebel against the idea that, for example, there is institutional racism. I don't think it should be called that, but there are inequities in society between, say, black and white that are due to racist attitudes, usually in the past, and racist biases and racist lookings past. All of those things are definitely true. There are all sorts of things in Black history that have helped to set us back that one should certainly know about. One should know about the redlining of neighborhoods where in many cities, most Black people lived in neighborhoods where banks would not give you a loan. All of these things are very real. I never felt like I rebelled against that. What I rebelled against was the idea that you base your whole sense of identity upon those things such that you live a life that's abbreviated because you're exaggerating how bad it still is. And you're distorting what's necessary to create dignified lives for Black people. And my feeling's always been, you probably have about 80 years. You know, you're lucky if you've got 80 years. And if you spend your whole life maintaining, in my time period, the same battle poses in the 80s and 90s that people needed in the 50s and 60s, after a while, you've spent your life play acting, and then you die and the world goes on. What I rejected was the exaggeration. And so, for example, I remember if there was one moment where I realized there was something wrong with me, it was in the wake of the Rodney King trial in 1991. And a lot of Black people I liked very much were united in saying, what happened to Rodney King shows that a Black man can't get justice in this country. And I remember thinking, no, that statement would have made sense in about 1965 and in many American cities, 1975. And there were islands of it even in 1991. But the idea that as a 20-something Black person, you were living in a country where you just couldn't get justice, it struck me as beyond rhetoric, especially given the general attitude they had towards what being Black meant then, as we were standing around at Stanford University, a campus where all of us had been evaluated according to adjusted standards out of the idea that we were really wanted on that campus, et cetera, that we were supposed to still be speaking that language that the Black Panthers had spoken. It struck me as a pose. And there was a part of me that was deeply disturbed by the artificiality of it, and that you were actually expected to live it.
Why the art? Okay, so you use very specific words. Oppose, artificial, as opposed to what? Like what? On what base? Like you're comparing it to something,
Sure.
And it sounds like you're comparing it. And you don't just regard it as an exaggeration. Your criticism has gone farther than that in the past. I mean, you've also directly stated that conceptualization of the problem in this form is actually interfering with the solutions that we still need to generate. So it's not just an exaggeration; it's a problem in and of itself, and that's a deeper criticism. So what's the artificiality as far as you're concerned, and compared to what?
Yeah,
what you're trying to live, apparently. But what is that exactly?
The question is, how much of an obstacle is racism after formal segregation has been battled, after racial attitudes changed profoundly in the 1970s? And I'm just old enough to have watched that happen. Just it gets to the point where, okay, racism does exist, both social and institutional, but how much of an obstacle is it to doing pragmatic things that will make poor Black people less poor and all Black people happier? So, quick example would be that these days you can look at the fact that Black kids tend not to do as well on standardized tests as other kids. It's there. Now, you can look at that and you can say, well, if Black kids don't do as well on the test, that's because of racism. And so we need to eliminate the test because the test is racist. Now, in what way is the test racist? 40 years ago, maybe those tests asked you what wine goes with chicken. That hasn't been true for generations now. So it's not about asking people things that they have no reason to know. How is it racist? And there are people today who even will imply that Black thought is somehow incompatible with tests like that, which is very close to saying that Black people are incapable of disembodied abstract thought. And many whites will chime in.
It's probably identical with that claim.
Yeah, it's very unfortunate, especially given that the people who are saying it know very well the history of that being said about Black people. And so you look at the tests and you say that because Black kids don't do well on them, they are examples of systemic racism. Well, you have to get rid of racism, so you have to get rid of the tests, which means that you tell America that Black kids can't have their abstract reasoning measured without it being racist. And then when you get somebody saying, well, then Black kids just must not be as quick on the uptake, you call them a racist. And in the meantime, it's ignored that you consider helping Black kids get better at the tests, helping Black kids' parents realize what free test prep programs there are in those neighborhoods. The tests just take a little bit of practice, but you're not supposed to talk about it because the tests, quote unquote, are racist. It's an abuse of language. And it's abuse of the very conception of what racism is. That's not what my mother raised me in. That's not your grandmother's racism. That's something that comes from a way of thinking that was marginal in 1955, became sexy in about 1966, and here in 2021 is being treated as impregnable wisdom. Someone Black has to speak out against that. So that's what I mean by the exaggeration and the artificiality and the outright harm that comes from these sorts of things.
Well, and with regard to it being a pose, so is it a pose of? So I could say, well, is it a pose of unearned virtue? I mean, virtue is not easy to earn. True virtue, you have to establish. Let's say we'll see where we go with this. Maybe you have to establish a relationship with beauty, and beauty is real. You have to establish a relationship with truth, and truth is real. And so to earn virtue is difficult because beauty and truth are imposing and formidable. If you have any sense at all, you see that. And so that's a daunting task to establish genuine virtue, and a terrifying task. And is the pose the willingness to adopt? See, because when I talk to the ideologue types, and maybe that happened most famously with an interview I had with, I think it was
I was
Helen.
just thinking about it. You mean Michael Eric Dyson, right? Yeah.
Oh, I wasn't thinking about Dyson. I was thinking about a GQ interviewer, and that interview's been watched like 40 million times now. It's this ideological pose is the aping of virtue, as far as I can tell. And I mean that in sort of a technical sense, is that you master this language and it contains the expressions of true virtue. But, you know, the kind of problems that you were talking about, and I see this on the environmentalist side of things too. Well, how do you get Black kids to do better in elementary school, let's say? Well, that's a more manageable problem. It's a problem that would take a little bit more humility to conceptualize. And it's also a really, really hard problem. And so to be virtuous in your attempts to solve that would probably require the dedication of your entire life, really, to take a good crack at that problem, right? Because that's a tough problem, man. And so maybe you don't want to do that and then you're enticed by your educators into this alternative possibility where all you really have to do is master a set of propositions and you're on the winning side. And that also gives you some convenient enemies, and maybe it fulfills to some degree the religious instinct. And it appalls me to see the universities complicit in this, and that they've come to see that. And I think part of that falseness and artificiality that you described, I think the fact that that exists is part of the overbearing insistence that the veil not be lifted and that no one question this, because what is underneath it is so damn ugly.
Yeah. Jordan, you have nailed something. I would be loath to go so near that word virtue, because the last thing I want to do is imply that somebody isn't virtuous. Nevertheless, you're getting it in that it's an unearned virtue which people are settling for, not because they're so callow as to wish to be virtuous without earning their stripes, but because religion is attractive. And so if you are surrounded by people who are brandishing this message that everything that you don't like is racist and you can get beyond it that way, it's not that you're lazy. It's not that you're trying to get stripes that you didn't earn, but it's comfortable, because part of being in that religion is that there's an us versus them conception, which is very comforting. You're part of a mission of uplift, which is very comforting. And in a university, that religion is there. It's as if they're, people from a church who are behind tables out in the plaza who are waiting to recruit people. That's there as soon as you hit campus. And so that's why so many people, and now it's not just Black kids, it's also white kids, fall for this way of looking at things, where what it is you become virtuous without having done the sorts of things that ideally one might have. You're virtue signaling, and it is unearned virtue, but it's because you wish to have a cloak. You're seeking a comfort zone. I can't hate anybody for that, but it does mean an awful lot of mendacity. That's the problem.
So I wasn't trying to imply, too, that all objections to that process are in and of themselves virtuous. And I'm also not trying to imply that I'm somehow especially virtuous. I'm actually quite terrified by the proposition that virtue is something real and something necessary, and that falling short of it is cataclysmic in some sense existentially. And so anyone who doesn't tremble at such a thought hasn't thought about it very deeply. And I want to have as much sympathy as possible, especially for young people who are enticed into this ideological identification, because you could look, I was a committed socialist when I was 16, and on intellectual grounds. I mean, talent is distributed equally amongst the human population, yet there are inequities in society. So how can that be anything but unfair? Well, fair enough. The answer to that is extremely complicated, but the problem announces itself, and you can certainly see how someone with a somewhat compassionate bent and even with an intellectual bent of sorts would be deeply attracted by the extremely well-honed arguments that have been put forward in favor of all those propositions. So,
or it can be even more primitive than that. I think that tribalism in and of itself is deeply attractive, and that this is something that can happen regardless of intelligence level. I remember in college, I wasn't a socialist, but I definitely hated Republicans until I met some. And I couldn't have told you during most of the time when I was in college what the difference between a Republican and a Democrat even was. I was busy doing other things, and it was easier not to know. There was no internet. But I knew that those Republicans, who were usually guys, it was usually a few guys with their own corner room down the hall, you didn't like them because they were Republicans and Ronald Reagan was bad because he was white and he dyed his hair or something like that. That was enough. Even for the smarter kids who were smoking cigarettes out in front of the dorm, that would do. I met Republicans as time went on and realized that, wait a minute, I'm not one of them, but I can't see them as insane. But before that had happened, I was very happily against a whole group of people who I knew nothing about. I don't think I was unique in that.
No, not at all. Okay, so maybe, if you don't mind, maybe we could close with this, because I'm starting to get tired and I'm not going to make much sense soon. So, if assuming I have so far, so I've been considering this proposition that's emerged from the woke end of the political spectrum. Let's say that all white people are racist, and I think, okay, are all white people racist? What's the answer to that? And the answer is yes, and no, and how dare you frame the question like that? That's the three answers. So yes, let's look at yes first. Well, are all people racist? Probably.
Yeah.
Probably. Like we have really, really intense in-group affiliative tendencies.
And yet we're supposed to suppose that maybe especially North American white people can learn to not be racist, unlike all other people in the world. That's a tough proposition.
Well, all of us, it's very difficult for all of us to overcome our in-group biases. And we never even want to do it completely because we want to love our family specially. And we also only have a limited amount of time and attention. So we have to love some people specially or do nothing at all for anyone. So this is a huge problem. So by stating it that way, that all white people are racist, you make racism a subcategory of white, and you actually underplay the terrible catastrophe and significance of the problem. And that's very dangerous because we all have to contend with this in-group preference and our proclivity to demonize anyone we put in the out-group. And that's a terrible tendency.
Yeah, and that question is one of them where I depart from what I wish were my comrades, in that are all white people racist? You know what? Probably to some extent. The white person who couldn't have an ounce of racism identified in them, even with sophisticated psychological testing, is probably vanishingly rare. Sure. And my sense of it is, when it's gotten to the point that it has, who cares? And I've often said to audiences, and I've watched some Black people in audiences, having not heard this, understand what I mean. If you really do have a basic self-love, then the fact that the whites around you have various degrees of racism really just shouldn't matter, because life consists of about 1,000 things other than whatever that residual racism is in that white person across the room who is, married to a Black person and, does all the sorts of things that these supposedly racist but hyper woke white people do. It's just, why does it matter so much? Now, it's one thing for somebody in 1925 to talk about white racism, 1955, 65. But today, my feeling about it is, with most of the white people that a Black person who talks about that sort of thing most knows, the answer is yes. Most of the white people are probably very slightly racist, but not in any way that will remotely matter in your life, even including being friends with them and sometimes close friends. Why are we so obsessed with that? And I think that's a very legitimate question. Life is about so much more than obsessing over something like that, except that when you obsess over something like that, you're part of a group. It's us versus them. And you have a sense of purpose and a sense of virtue because you're the person who's being racist. But I find that a rather feeble way of going about an existence with true virtue. I've never used that word so much as today.
It might also indicate interference with the process of coming to terms with your own in-group preference and tendency to derogate whatever out-group you happen to be surrounded by. I mean, I do see this as a terribly deep human problem. I presume that in the 1970s that Jane Goodall found that chimps go on raiding parties, right? And that was a major league discovery. It shows how that proclivity to demonize the out-group is at least 6 million years old. Right?
Definitely.
It's deep and it's in us. And so, and we all have to contend with it. And so now we could have an intelligent conversation nonetheless about the manner in which the predominance of one ethnic group in a given society might exacerbate those tendencies.
Of course.
But that's something that's certainly independent of the notion that all white people are racist. Right?
And then you can also see that, it's easy to believe that progress doesn't happen than to admit that it happens slowly. The degree to which most white Americans are racist in 2021, not to mention white Canadians from what I've seen, is much, much smaller than anybody would have expected about 30 years ago. So the question is also just extent. And yet virtue is excellence in my mind. If we're talking about Aristotle, virtue is not moral upstandingness, it's excellence. You can't be excellent. You can't live an excellent life if you're hobbled in distorted views of what racism is and how much it matters. These particular things will not allow you to be the best that you can be, unless you think that the best that you can be is somebody who is hyper articulate about discussing bias against other people. And what a narrow topic. There's so much to do. And so I just chafe against it.